Welcome to Hot Drama TV.
When the sky is still unwritten. Liu Yuning and the quiet turning point of 2026. There are moments in an actor's career that arrive quietly. No fireworks. No loud declarations. Just a subtle shift, almost invisible. Until one day you look back and realize everything has changed. For Liu Yuning, 2026 may be exactly that moment. Not the year of the biggest hype. Not the year of the loudest headlines. But the year when the path he chose began to reveal who he truly wanted to become. A man who never took the obvious road. Liu Yuning's story has never been linear. He did not enter the industry through polished training rooms or carefully designed debut plans. He came from music, from a voice that carried raw emotion long before it carried fame. His early recognition came from sound, not sight. From feeling, not image. And when he stepped into acting, many assumed it would be temporary. A crossover. A side chapter. But Liu Yuning stayed. Not because it was easy, but because it was unfinished. 2026. Two stories, one question. In 2026, Liu Yuning stands at an interesting crossroads, marked by two very different dramas, each pulling him in opposite directions, yet somehow telling the same story. One is quiet. The other is vast. One asks questions about love. The other asks questions about existence. Together they form a mirror. About love. When romance is no longer safe. On the surface, About Love looks like a modern romance. But listen carefully. This is not a story about falling in love. It is a story about whether love should be tested at all. Liu Yuning plays Xiao Bei, a man who does not arrive to rescue the heroine, nor to dominate the narrative. Instead, he enters like a question mark, calm, observant, emotionally present. He does not force belief. He invites doubt. In a world where the female lead sees love as a game of control and protection, Xiao Bei becomes something unsettling. Someone sincere. And sincerity in this story is dangerous. This role is important not because it is loud or dramatic, but because it demands restraint. It asks Liu Yuning to act not with grand gestures, but with silence. With pauses. With eyes that hold back more than they reveal. Here love is not romanticized. It is examined, measured, almost interrogated. And through Xiao Bei, Liu Yuning explores a question that feels deeply personal to his own journey. What happens when you stop protecting yourself and choose honesty instead? Limitless Skies. Standing inside something bigger than yourself. If About Love is intimate, Limitless Skies is the opposite. Based on the epic novel Tian, this drama unfolds across vast realms, cosmic hierarchies, and philosophical struggles about fate, power, and transcendence. Liu Yuning does not stand at the center of this universe. And that may be the point. In a genre often obsessed with protagonists and dominance, choosing a supporting role is a quiet act of humility. It signals a different priority. Growth over spotlight. Here Liu Yuning becomes part of a system. A world that does not bend around him. His presence is measured not by screen time, but by impact within the narrative ecosystem. It is a reminder that sometimes the most important roles are not about being seen but about belonging. The pattern beneath the choices. At first glance, these two dramas could not be more different. But beneath the surface, a pattern emerges. Both stories are about limits. The limits of love. The limits of belief. The limits of self-definition. In About Love, the limit is emotional. How much truth can a heart endure? In Limitless Skies, the limit is existential. How small is one life in an infinite universe? And Liu Yuning stands between them, not trying to conquer either, just trying to understand. Beyond the idol label. For years, Liu Yuning has carried labels placed on him by others. Singer, idol, visual, traffic. But 2026 does not feel like a year of labels. Feels like a year of intent. Choosing roles that are quieter. Choosing stories that ask questions instead of giving answers. Choosing to grow slowly where many would rush. This is not the strategy of someone chasing applause. It is the strategy of someone building endurance. Why this moment matters. Audiences often mistake transformation for explosion. But real transformation is subtle. It happens when an actor stops proving something and starts exploring something. With these 2026 projects, Liu Yuning seems less interested in being admired and more interested in being understood. and perhaps in understanding himself. The sky is still unwritten. The title Limitless Skies carries an unintentional metaphor, because Liu Yuning's future, like the sky, is not defined by one direction. It is wide, uncertain, still unwritten, and maybe that is exactly where his strength lies, not in knowing where he will land, but in choosing stories that allow him to keep asking why. Final reflection. 2026 may not be remembered as Liu Yuning's loudest year, but years later, it may be remembered as the year he stopped chasing roles and started choosing paths. And sometimes that is where the real story begins. When silence begins to speak, there is something audiences rarely notice at first. When an actor begins to choose quieter roles, it is often misunderstood as hesitation. But in truth, it is usually the opposite. Silence appears only when someone is no longer afraid of being unheard. In 2026, Liu Yuning's choices feel less like ambition and more like conversation. A conversation with time, with experience, with the version of himself that once stood at the beginning, unsure whether this road would ever feel like home. The weight of not being the center. In Limitless Skies, Liu Yuning does not command the universe. He orbits within it. And that matters, because stepping away from the center requires confidence, not in popularity but in purpose. It means trusting that presence does not need dominance to be felt. Within vast mythologies and layered philosophies, his character becomes a reminder. Even in infinite skies, every constellation is made of smaller lights. This is acting as participation, not conquest. And it subtly reshapes how audiences perceive him, not as someone fighting for relevance, but as someone secure enough to share space. Love without armor. Meanwhile, in About Love, the battlefield is internal. Xiao Bei does not raise his voice. He does not perform grand sacrifices. He simply stays. And staying when someone expects you to leave is its own kind of courage. Liu Yuning plays this role with emotional restraint, allowing discomfort to linger instead of resolving it quickly. The pauses matter. The unspoken matters. Because this story understands something painfully true. Love is not destroyed by betrayal alone. Sometimes it is destroyed by fear of vulnerability. Through Xiao Bei, Liu Yuning gives form to a type of masculinity rarely centered in modern romance. One that listens more than it convinces, that feels more than it defends. The actor as a listener. What connects these two roles is not genre. It is attention. In both dramas, Liu Yuning is not shouting his existence into the story. He is listening to the world around him, to other characters, to the emotional rhythm of each scene. This suggests a shift in artistic instinct. He is no longer acting at the audience. He is acting with them. And that is when viewers stop watching from a distance and start seeing themselves reflected back. The audience grows with the actor. There is a reason these projects are quietly resonating online. Not because they promise fantasy escapes or idealized romance, but because they mirror real uncertainty. People today are tired of certainty. They live in questions. Is love safe? Is effort enough? Is it okay not to be the main character in every chapter of your own life? Liu Yuning's 2026 roles do not answer these questions. They sit with them. And that shared silence becomes a bridge between actor and audience. A career no longer in a hurry. Perhaps the most striking thing about this phase of Liu Yuning's career is what it lacks. Urgency. There is no sense of chasing trends. No desperate leap toward headlines. No need to prove legitimacy. Instead, there is patience. And patience in an industry built on speed is quietly radical. It suggests that he is no longer running toward a destination, but walking within a direction. What comes after the turning point? Every turning point invites a question. What comes next? But maybe the more important question is, what has already changed? After 2026, Liu Yuning may take bigger roles. Or smaller ones. He may lead or support, or surprise in ways we cannot yet predict. But one thing feels clear. He has crossed the line between being seen and being understood. And once an actor reaches that place, there is no going back. The story that continues off-screen. The most powerful stories do not end when the screen fades to black. They continue quietly, in thought, in reflection, in the spaces between scenes. Liu Yuning's 2026 is not a climax. It is a breath. A pause before something deeper unfolds. And perhaps that is why it stays with us. Because in a world obsessed with noise, he chose to let the silence speak.